Hey guys, John Paulamy here, Actionable Intelligence. Today is Saturday, March 26th, and this is the weekly market update. You are all familiar with the disclaimer. Anything that you hear or see on this podcast or video is not to be taken as investment advice. I am not a financial advisor. I'm just a guy on the internet giving his opinions. You should not take what I say as advice. You should do your own diligence. It's your money. It's your responsibility. Before I get started, just want some more housekeeping. I know I'm working on trying to get the website back up, trying to get everything straightened out. I think I've been talking to some people, so I'm thinking about just retooling the whole Actionable Intelligence Alert experience. People have reached out to me, so I am having some discussions with some folks, so just bear with me. Mostly we'll be communicating through this videos. You can subscribe if you go down in the links below. If you want to subscribe to the newsletter, there's subscription links below. Also, if you want to sign up for my weekly free emails, I put out, usually try to do it once a week, but sometimes depends on my schedule. You can sign up down below also, and you can get a flavor for what we talk about in general terms. I'm not going to give any of the good stuff away. That's for the newsletter guys, but we do put out a free newsletter, and once a week, an email, short email. We don't spam you, and we try to share what's going on. You know, it's the Actionable Intelligence Alert newsletter has been doing very well, obviously, with the resource bull market that we're in, that's been exacerbated by the recent events with the incursion of Russian forces into Ukraine and the subsequent sanctions and all the knock-on effects from that. So we've been doing really good, taking advantage of some opportunities. So if you're interested in sharing in some of those picks, we dive down. You know, I give a lot of the free stuff away, right? It's obvious. Buy oil service stocks, buy Schlumberger, buy Helix, buy, you know, these are all the big caps, but I drill down into like the smaller caps, less known companies, ones with more upside, shall we say. So that's the advantage that you get with the subscription. So link in the show notes below if you're interested in that. So let's get into it for this week. Oh, one other thing. Please help us out if you do like the videos, if you enjoy what we're doing here, like, subscribe, share the videos. If you're on the podcast listening, take the time to go to Spotify or Apple, iTunes, wherever, leave a review, mark 5 stars, whatever. It helps us, it really does. So we appreciate that if you are inclined to do that. All right, so I titled this slide, Geopolitics Matters to Investing. And so, as we've talked about even before the events that have happened with this invasion of Ukraine by Russia, we talked about in the past bias, emotion. I have, with this, regardless of the fact, take out of the equation your personal feelings on what has happened, whether you know the history of it, of the situation, whether you know who's right, who's wrong. The facts on the ground is that Russia has invaded Ukraine and has specified 4 or 5 objectives, many times what it plans on doing. It doesn't matter that we like it, we don't like it, we want to go over there and fight, we want to do something. It does not matter as individual investors. What we need to do is we need to look at how things are, and then what are the probabilities for various outcomes, and then what are the effects on the investments. That sounds cold, that sounds callous, that sounds cynical. This is an investment video and blog and newsletter. That's what this is. And the adult person understands the world that they're in and adapts themselves to it. You know, I'm not going to get into my personal beliefs around philosophy and religion and politics. It's irrelevant. They act as biases on my thinking. The fact of the matter is that we have to look at this for what it is and what the possible outcomes are. And so obviously the first thing to go in any kind of warfare is the truth. And so a lot of people in the West are being subjected to, and in Russia, are being subjected to a lot of propaganda. So it's necessary to try to cut through that as best we can. And to do that, you have to take in other information sources. What we have a tendency to do since the internet's come around, I always thought that the advent of the internet, it's such a great research tool and such a great tool for meeting people around the world and connecting. But, I thought it was going to be like the Gutenberg press or whatever. It was going to open up and just free people's minds. We were going to be able to get to the truth. And what I found is, especially with social media, is that people silo themselves and go for a lot of confirmation bias. And so what I want to do is kind of talk about what's happening here, just briefly, the military and then the geopolitical situation and how I think it's going to affect the things that we're investing in, speculating in. Okay, so the fact of the matter here is that the Russians are making progress. There's a lot of narratives in the West. Well, they thought they were going to do this in 3 days or 2 weeks. I've seen nothing except for Western people saying that. Russians have never indicated how long this is going to take. What the Russians have said all along is that they are trying to achieve several objectives. The first objective that they said they were going to do, because they did not, they felt that Ukraine, as it was currently structured on February 24th, was moving towards NATO and EU membership. They were not going to allow that, as they had said for many years. No one wanted to listen to them. No one wanted to negotiate. And so they are going to deal with this militarily. As Claus Fitz would say, the cliche that people use that warfare is just an extension of politics by another means. It's actually, the quote's different than that, but regardless, that's what's happening here. There is a political goal that the Russians are trying to achieve. Number one, demilitarization of Ukraine. Billions of dollars over the last 10 years or so, billions of dollars, equipment, training has been poured in from the West into the Ukrainian army to modernize it, to train it, to bring it to a level, in some cases with some of its units, that they are almost interchangeable with NATO units. Not the whole entire army, but portions of it. And it's probably, I think someone said by numbers, it was one or two of the largest armies in Europe. I think Russia, they flip-flop. So this is a real war. This isn't, Grenada, or this isn't Afghanistan or Iraq. This is a real, history book warfare, combined arms warfare. And so what we're seeing on the ground is very simple. The first day or so of the war, the first week, few days, the Russians basically knocked out most of the ability of the Ukrainians to challenge in the air. So the Russians have degraded the command and control structure. They've been using standoff weapons, as we've seen over and over, cruise missiles, hypersonic missiles. They can hit anywhere in this country. They were, they blew up the mercenary base that was over here, and those missiles were launched from the Caspian Sea, way over here by Kazakhstan. So there's all kinds of fuel dumps that have been taken out. If you want to see the stuff, you can see it. You can go on Telegram. You can find the channels. If you're watching Fox or CNN or BBC, you're not going to see this stuff. You have to go dig deep into the internet and Telegram. There's plenty of channels. If you just want to look at another perspective that may be slanted towards the Russian view, that's easy to get to, southfront.org or Saker over the Vineyard. Those are obviously considered more pro-Russian. And the fact of the Saker, it is pro-Russian, but you can get a different flavor of what's going on. And so what you have here is that you had these are the two contested DPR and LPR, Donetsk and Lugansk. Their militias moved, nobody asked the question, why did the Ukrainians have a couple 100,000 troops over here in Eastern Ukraine? But that's for another discussion. So what has happened is that this is typical Russian Soviet military doctrine. DPR and LPR militias advanced on these contact lines that holds the Ukrainian army in place. Russian forces move in. You start creating, this map's not as intense as some of the other maps, but you create what they call in Russia a cauldron. You surround, you hold, this is static. They're held in place because if they try to retreat or move out of their positions, the oncoming forces will engage them. You surround, and then a cauldron being a big pot, then you increase the heat on the cauldron. What do? Now you have air superiority that the Russians established in the first couple of weeks. So they are flying 300, 400, 500 sorties a day, taking out targets of opportunity. I mean, they've pretty much already taken out a lot of the command and control all over the country. Fuel depots, armaments depots have been taken out by standoff weapons. And now you have a situation now where you just have some attrition going on, right? There's no way that you can get supplies here. If you do, you're going to be harassed by attack helicopters. And I mean, the Russians have satellites and drones, just like the Ukrainians do, and the Americans are feeding them Ukrainians information. The problem is that the Ukrainians have no ability at this point in time to concentrate forces, to communicate, to move. They're running out of supplies, ammunition, fuel, food. They're constantly being harassed. They're constantly being bombarded. And you have to remember that the Russian army is built around an artillery and rocket artillery type deal. This is what they do. They create a holding. They try to hold a force in place, surround it into cauldron, or Kessel as the Germans called it during World War II on the Eastern Front. Now you have cut off the rears, and then you just turn up the heat by bombardments, starve them out basically until they surrender. So that's being achieved. You know, the idea here in Kiev, there's no intent. That's a lot of the Western people are saying, well, the intent was they were going to take Kiev in 3 days. Well, maybe they thought they would do the original dash in, and maybe everything would fall apart once they, you know, I give the Russians enough credit that they maybe had an initial plan, but they pivoted. You know, this is real war. That's what you have to do, right? This isn't put 500,000 troops in Kuwait and Saudi Arabia and then bomb Iraq for, 3 months straight, then roll in and declare victory. This is real warfare. So this is what happens. There's been many, many Ukrainian tactical victories here and there, but they have never once during this entire exercise been able to mount a legitimate and successful major counteroffensive to retake territory. They have no ability without having air superiority. They cannot move. So they're stuck in these static defensive positions. And getting back to Kiev, the idea was, with the Black Sea fleet sitting off Odessa, with the incursion by Kiev, that forces any other Ukrainian army components to be held in place. They can't go here and try to relieve, because if they do, then this force would take Kiev. If they try to leave from Odessa and go here and relieve or move towards Kiev, then the Black Sea, then you'll have amphibious landings here. And so this is actually a brilliant strategy. This is the 30th day of the war, and there's been a lot of criticism of the Russians. They probably deserve a lot of it. I'm not a military expert. I'm just telling you, I'm a hobbyist, military hobbyist. I've been interested in military history and tactics my entire life. I've war gamed my entire life. Do they make a lot of mistakes? Yeah, they've made mistakes. And like I said, the Ukrainians have gotten a lot of, tactical victories, but the strategic plan, the outcome is going to happen. And so the first thing that the Russians were trying to achieve that they said today, at least the Ministry of Defense in their press briefing said, the first stage of the special operation, as they call it, is over, which is to, basically demilitarize. So you have no ability of the Ukrainian army to act as an army in the sense that it's organized and can mount offensives. It cannot do that. It cannot resupply. They can't. You see this big cauldron being formed. There's all kinds of mini cauldrons being formed, and Mariupol, which is right here, which was an area where you had a lot of right-wing type people there. That's in a mop-up now. That's over with. Is the city destroyed? Pretty much destroyed. The city is destroyed. You can see it on the videos. Patrick Lancaster is an American guy. He's been living in the DPR for 8 years. He's been following the battles. He has pretty good video footage. He's like one of the first actual well, many people won't consider him a journalist, but he considers himself a journalist, and he's been in the middle of this. So if you want to see what it looks like, you can see him. He talks to a lot of the real people and interviews them. So anyways, so the next point of this thing is to do what? The next thing is as the Russians call it, this is what causes people to get all upset emotionally, the denazification thing, which is already starting to happen here. You know, your Azov, your right wing people, whether they're real Nazis or not, is beyond the scope of this. They're basically liquidated. They were told by midnight last night to surrender, or there would no prisoners would be taken. So that is in process. People have been trying to escape. I've seen videos where Azov people and right sector people dress up as women and try to sneak through the lines. That doesn't work. You'll see videos of people leaving Mariupol on the humanitarian corridors that the Russians set up, and any male of military age has to take his shirt off and get inspected for Nazi tattoos. If he has them, he's going to be interned and interrogated. And if he's found to be an actual participant, he will be liquidated. Foreign fighters, mercenaries, whatever you want to call them, all these people that you see that they show on the news going over there, they are not actual recognized combatants. When they are caught, if they are caught, they will be liquidated. So this is what's happening. Now what will happen is these forces collapse here in the east, the Ukrainian forces, which they will. Then you'll notice something that the Russians like to do. They will continue to negotiate while the fighting continues. That's something that we don't do in the West. So we're not used to seeing this. And like I said, because you're trying to achieve a political outcome. And the political outcome is basically the rest of the elements, which I'm going to describe. The recognition of Crimea, which is down here, as Russian territory. Whatever Ukrainian state is left to be there is going to recognize Crimea as Russian territory, as it has been since the 17th century. The recognition of the DPR and LPR as autonomous regions, as Ukraine signed on the Minsk II agreements in 2014 and has not held up their side of it, that will happen. And so the pressure, the military actions will continue until these things happen. There's not going to be relief. We've now had the President of the United States, the head of NATO, the head of the EU all say, many leaders in Europe have said the same thing. There's not going to be a no-fly zone. There's not going to be NATO or American troops here. So this is just a matter of time now. And so there's a view that, well, the Russians are going to go all the way to, Western Ukraine. There's no reason to do that. The Dnieper River, in case you don't know the geography, basically cuts the country in two. It basically dumps into this is the city where my wife lives, right here in Kherson. It's been under Russian control for 3 weeks. It dumps in there, and you're basically going to see a swath like from Kharkiv, which is, let's see if I can find it on here, up here. You're going to basically see this whole area, and maybe to Odessa. I'm not sure yet if they're going to try to go all the way and connect with. This is a Transnistria, which is a Russian protectorate. There's Russian troops there. It's a area that broke away from Moldova. And you may see a land bridge all the way to there and confiscation of this territory. Basically, this is all going to be called Novorossiya. And now you have the Poles talking about doing an incursion because they have historical and territorial claims to Lvov here and these areas that were part of the Polish-Lithuanian Confederation back in the day. They may move in there. We don't know. But basically, this is just a matter of time now. I would suggest to you by the end of April, the military portion of this will be completed, whatever that means. And then a political settlement will be made to Russia's liking, if you will. There's nothing that the West is going to do. The West is not going to risk a nuclear war over this. And then we'll move on. So what are the repercussions? Well, we've talked about it, right? You've seen the sanctions, which have been the worst sanctions ever put on a country in the history of the world. I was going to put up, I forgot to put it up, a chart of the ruble. When the sanctions came out, the central bank of Russia was sanctioned by the West. Because you need to understand, it's not the whole world. It's the Western countries, United States, Europe, Canada, but a lot of other countries are not joining in the sanctions. About half the world's not joining in the sanctions. Basically, the Southern Hemisphere, Southeast Asia, Central Asia, they want nothing to do with this. This is not, I was watching several talk shows in India, and how a lot of the, we have now our government, the US, going around and demanding that various countries do this, various countries do that, demanding China support sanctions or they're going to be sanctioned. I mean, the West is way over its skis. They are on a bullet train. And I think that a lot of the night after the dopamine rush of putting Ukrainian flags up and being virtue signalings wearing off, and the reality of what has happened over something that really doesn't matter to most people in the world is setting in. And so how do you get off this train? So you've put the worst sanctions. The sanctions on Russia are worse than the sanctions that were put on Nazi Germany during World War II. Even during World War II, the central bank of Germany was not sanctioned, if you can believe that. That's an actual true statement. So you've basically told Russia, we don't want you to be part of the West. You're not going to be part of the West. And so that's fine. They'll pivot to the East. And there'll be a recession in Russia, I'm quite sure. But there's going to be economic pain for the entire world. And what I find interesting is this whole thing was avoidable. There was never any intention that the NATO was going to allow Ukraine into NATO. There was really never any intention that they were going to let one of the most corrupt governments, and Russia's corrupt too, guys. It's not like, Russia, yay, Ukraine, nay. These are two of the most corrupt places in the world, okay? There was no way. And so this little game that was being played on the Ukrainians, they were used as a pawn. And how many times, I said it during the Afghanistan situation, remember, if you recall, when we pulled out, we rug pulled people on that. We rug pulled the Kurds in Iraq. We just continually rug pull. When are people going to, we're like Lucy with the football, and the rest of these people are Charlie Browns. Do not trust the United States or the West. Okay, there was no way. First of all, we could not let Ukraine into NATO because it had, one of the rules to entry is you have no territorial disputes. So they had a territorial dispute before this war broke out. It was, Crimea. So there was no way they were going to be allowed to go there. So they were being used as a way by the West and the neocons and the powers that be to antagonize Russia. And I don't think anybody thought Russia would retaliate. And they did. They went all in. And the thing you need to realize before you start, it's interesting. I talked about it last week. Other people have brought it up. They're doing polls, and 32% of the people polled said it's worth having a nuclear war over this. People in the West don't know. People in the United States do not know what real war is. Okay. And I think that with the exception of the neocons, a small group of neocons in the West, I think people at the Pentagon, people at the Federal Reserve, the Treasury, they're horrified of what has happened here. They're horrified. And these people all jumped. When I say these people, these politicians in all these countries in Western Europe, who have tied themselves, by the way, to Russian energy, Russian agriculture for their very survival, jumped on this virtue signaling bullet train and now can't get off. When Biden went to China or talked to Xi Jinping about this, he was trying to get Xi Jinping recently to influence Russia or get them to back off what they were doing in Ukraine. He was told by Biden was told by Xi Jinping, the person that puts the bell on the tiger has to take the bell off. So that's what's happened. We've put the bell on Russia. We've sanctioned them, and now there is no reverse gear. Okay, you can't just back it off now. That's not how this works. It's not like, well, let's cut a deal. So now you have these crazy politicians in Western Europe saying things like, well, we'll replace the natural gas, the 40% of the natural gas we get from Russia in 2 years. This is not going to happen. The infrastructure doesn't exist for these LNG terminals. The gas is 5-10 times more expensive. You'll be competing against all the other people that want liquefied natural gas, seaborne cargoes. It's just a big mess. And a lot of people around the world now are going to pay the penalty. We're all going to have to go through a measure of pain now. And now we're going to see this globalist experience, or globalist globalism, the point issues wanted, that the Davos people wanted, it's crumbling before their eyes. The whole thing is crumbling, because now you're going to have a bipolar or multipolar world, less globalism, more nationalism, less trade, more trade barriers, more resource nationalism, which I've shown it for the last couple of weeks. It's getting more intense now, and that's inflationary. That's not deflationary. That creates less economic growth, not more economic growth. And so, like I said before, we still can't even conceive, I don't think, of the repercussions and knock-on effects of these poor decisions that were made by these people. And so here we go. We're going to continue on. This is what I say. You've heard me say this before. This is what these people do. They're supposed to be so smart. They have all these high educations from Yale and Harvard and the various institutes in Europe where they all congregate, but they have no common sense. They have no ability to understand. They're stupid in the sense not of intelligence, not even of book smart, but stupid in the sense of not understanding cause and effect, not understanding that if you do this, this is the reaction. And this is, if I throw a rock into the pond, that the ripple effects go out. That's what I'm saying. So here we have, Gavin Newsom here we have, today, Brent closed at $120 a barrel. We're in the shoulder season, folks. We're not even into the summer driving season yet. Okay. I see no supply response happening anywhere. And, we're going to probably see, I don't know, like I said before, inflation adjusted all-time high oil price would be $220 a barrel. I can see it happening. We're definitely going to be breaking the nominal high this summer. We'll go over $150 a barrel this summer. I have no doubt. And that still wouldn't be an all-time high inflation adjusted. You'd have to go to over $200 a barrel. Is that possible? I know at some point the world economy breaks, right? Especially when I talk to you and show you the slide on diesel. Diesel's going straight up on a rocket ship, which, the whole world is based on diesel fuel for transportation of goods and construction and all kinds of things. But we'll get to that. But here's, we make these bad decisions. We set ourselves up, 2 years ago, we had record oil production in this country and we had gas prices down. We had peace in the world. And look what we have now. One bad decision after another, creating more and more chaos. Okay. And then being exacerbated by another dumb decision on top of the previous dumb decision. This is not indicative to me of a master plan to take over the world. This is a bunch of people that don't know what they're doing. Okay. Hoping something sticks. You had Boris Johnson now running over to Saudi Arabia and begging for more oil and being told by the Saudis, no, we're not pumping any more oil. Running around like the administration was, our administration, going to Iran and Venezuela. Is that part of the master plan to take over the world, going around and begging these dictatorships for more oil? And in the meantime, we're not seeing anything here in the US. But here's what we're seeing. Breaking: Gavin Newsom unveils gas relief package. $400 rebate per registered car, max 2 cars. Payments could start in July. $750 million for 3 months free public transit, up to $600 million to pause part of diesel sales tax for 1 year, $523 million to pause inflation adjustment to gas, diesel, and excise taxes. And so, as I've said before, price, when you have limited supply, price will ration. The price will go up, and the person or the people or the industry or whatever that needs the fuel the most will pay the highest price. And the frivolous uses will get tamped down, right, from demand destruction. But if you encourage people by giving them more money to go out and buy commodities that are in short supply, you're going to exacerbate the price increase. You're not going to get the demand destruction that helps cure the high prices. But it's not just in California. Here we go. Putting fuel on an already hot fire hasn't worked in the past as a strategy to cool the situation. Quebec province in Canada hand out $500 payments to residents to counter inflation via National Post. And then they have a clown, because this is clown world, right? We politicians create these problems, and then we make more dumb decisions because we don't want to get blamed, right? The main job of a politician isn't to kiss your life and make it better or solve your problems. It's to get reelected. And so when oil goes to $150 or $200 a barrel this year or next year, and gasoline's $8 or $10 a gallon, there will be repercussions at the ballot box, and they know this. So this is why you're seeing these dumb decisions, which won't work, by the way. Europe also giving stimmies. This is from Shy Girl. Here comes the stimmy. EU companies affected by sanctions against Russia over its invasion of Ukraine can get up to 400,000 euros in state aid, European Commission document seen. And where are they actually getting all this money for all these stimmies and aid? All these places are bankrupt. So again, I guess the people that really need it in the food industries are getting stiff. They can only get 35,000 euros. Right, so the politicians in the EU jumped on this train that Britain and the U.S. basically instigated. The Germans, the weak leadership in Germany is just astounding. And I've heard like some commentators say, "Well, this whole episode is going to strengthen Europe." No, it's not. This whole episode is going to lead to the destruction of the EU, which I was predicting anyways. Okay, that's what it's going to lead to. There's no way. With the fuel problems we're going to have, food problems, this kind of nonsense, that this is going to hold. Oh, they're going to increase their military budgets. No one in Europe wants to serve in the military. They certainly don't want to be forward deployed for the potential of getting in a war with Russia. It's stupid. And something you need to remember about this whole thing that I think is being missed by most people in the West. I tried to make the point earlier, but my mind got, it's late in the day. I'm doing this on Friday night to get it to you guys Saturday morning. The Russian people have had twice before in their history, have had existential threats to their civilization and to their lives. During the invasion by Napoleon, during the Napoleonic Wars, and by Germany during World War II. They were, especially the recent history of the German invasion, when I say existential threat, that means total war, total destruction of one of the combatants. If you look at what happened when Germany invaded the Soviet Union, it was total war on the population. Depending on the estimates you want to believe, 25 to 30 million people dying in the Soviet Union. Okay, total mobilization of the entire nation for one goal and one goal only. The expulsion and destruction of Germany. Okay, that's what happened. And then when they got into Germany, what happened there? The total destruction of that country. I mean, you literally had fanatics, SS fanatics, and they were foreign volunteers, by the way. Some of the last platoons and companies fighting at the Reichstag during the Battle of Berlin were from France, by the way, and foreign volunteers. So they literally had to go building by building, house by house. I mean, they celebrate this every May 8th in Russia. They'll have the parade again this year, I'm quite sure. And it's victory over European fascism. They remember this. And so we, as the United States, do not have that burned into our DNA. And so Putin, you need to understand this. I can't get into this in this video, but this is how they look at things in Russia. It's not the same experience you have as an American or necessarily as a Western European. The history of Russia goes back to even before, 8th and 9th century. They've always had strong men in place. This is part of also because of the influence of being invaded by the Mongols and all stuff. And so when Putin is the leader of Russia and people say, well, it's got to be made up that he has 70 or 80% approval. It's not made up. This is in the DNA. And so the Russian people believe this, the majority of them, and their leadership believes that this situation is an existential threat to their survival. Now, you may think that's silly. You may scoff at it. That's just propaganda. That's just them saying that to justify. That's how they think. And see, that's part of the problem, is not looking at the way the other party looks at things. You look at it from your perspective, and then you make decisions based on your perspective, and then you find out that that's not accurate, and then you find that you make bad decisions. So I got off on a tangent a little bit, but Europe is not, the European Union is not a real thing. You have 30 different countries there with 30 different cultures, languages. This this situation, I think, has a good chance of really ripping the EU apart long term, but we'll see. So going on here, here's, I talked about this, what's going to happen with oil prices. Here is US crude storage with SPR. Here's your 5-year average in here. Then here's 2018 to 2021. Here's 2022. There's no demand destruction going on right now. This is not good. And we're, like I said, we're in the shoulder season. We should be building inventories in preparation for refineries coming out of turnaround season and cranking up for the summer driving season. So what I suggest is going to happen is that we are going to see, well, I mean, I think it's really, it's possible we could see, the old highs, nominal highs get breached this year. And then depending on what happens, we could make all-time new highs in 2023. But like I said, I think I would suggest to you that at some point, these high energy prices are going to break the economy. I don't think it's going to happen at $100 or $120 a barrel, but there is a number out there that no economy can operate at where if gas is $8 or $10 a gallon. I'm sorry, the United States economy is based on a commuting society. Nobody walks anywhere. Everybody's in a vehicle, commuting to work, commuting to the store, products coming by truck. It just will not be able to tolerate that kind of oil price. So this is what I'm basing it on. People say, well, when are you going to sell? Well, this is one of my key indicators. As long as crude storage is going down, the price is going to go up. It's just that simple. It's not hard to understand. So we want to see a sustained, turn on this, and then inventories climbing, storage climbing. We're not seeing that. The price of crude and refined products are screaming at the market, produce more hydrocarbons. And so when it rains, it pours, right? Saudi Arabia, the Saudis say, quote, no longer responsible for oil market stability. For many, many decades, since I've been alive, at least since I was a kid, or since the Arab oil embargoes, when everything stabilized, OPEC had this view that they were going to balance the supply and demand of oil such that the oil price was high enough to provide the necessary funds for them to pay off their populations and do their social welfare and everything, but not too high or not high enough where demand would be choked off because of high energy prices. And so what they're saying now is that they're no longer going to be responsible. And let's, for all intents and purposes, we say OPEC, we are talking about Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is the largest producer in OPEC, and they call the shots. They have the most weight. And so here's the article from Reuters. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. Saudi Arabia, the world's largest exporter of crude, said March 21st, it no longer has, quote, responsibility for any shortage in oil supplies to global markets in light of the attacks on its oil facilities, according to a statement from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs reported by the official Saudi press agency. These are the attacks from Yemen. The Saudis have been at war with the Iranian-backed people there in Yemen, and these people have been launching missiles at their oil facilities, but they've had ongoing attacks on their oil facilities. I think this is an excuse. I think this is an excuse the Saudis are using because they don't have the spare capacity that everybody said they did, that the Pointy Shoes, that the IEA said, oh, they have 5 or 6 million barrels. OPEC has 5 or 6 million barrels of spare capacity. Don't worry. I don't think there is any spare capacity. And that's something that several analysts that have gotten this right have been saying. Okay. And I think this is an excuse. Oh, all of a sudden now they've been throwing rockets from Yemen for, 5 to 7 years. I mean, you remember a couple of years ago, they hit a facility and oil prices didn't even move. I think this is a convenient excuse to finally say that, well, we're not going to be responsible for, we're being attacked all the time. Okay. Riyadh has traditionally maintained a 2 million barrel a day spare capacity buffer, which it has used on request to help maintain global market stability during supply shocks, such as the Gulf War in the early 1990s or the US invasion of Iraq in 2003. However, Riyadh has so far refused to comply with the international pressure to release more oil or deviate from OPEC plus deal with Russia on production since international sanctions were imposed on Kremlin. And this goes back to the realignment of the world. Okay. Since we've had this new administration in place, it has alienated all these people. And I think you have several things possibly going on here. The alienation of some of these people that were, well, I hate to use the word allies, but shall we say we were in a relationship because it was mutually beneficial. That's one aspect of it. And the other aspect is I just don't think they have the spare capacity that they used to have. That's just, and this is a convenient excuse to, announce to the world that, hey, you're on your own, basically. Here's the CEO of Vitol, which is a major oil trading company. What do they say? Expect a demand gap for oil to widen. Here's Josh Young, Bison Interests, very good analyst you should follow. He's been one of the main guys that's been talking about the lack of spare capacity, not just in OPEC, but the entire world. And I think he's gotten it right. But here's a tweet he put out. Vitol CEO says, given limited investment in oil production, expect a, quote, demand gap to widen over the next few years. Sounds like something Bison Interests has been saying. Okay, demand is recovering faster than supply. This is from a, while oil demand has been recovering to its pre-pandemic long-term trend, there hasn't been enough supply recovery to meet it. Deficits may worsen in 2022. It's not may worsen, they're going to worsen. Price is going to go up. So here's what I was talking about diesel. So here's back to 1995 to current. Price of diesel, US weekly retail on highway diesel price, US per gallon, over $5 a gallon. This is the last peak during 2008 when we had the great financial crisis, and we peaked out at about $4.75 a gallon. We've rocketed past there. Okay, we do not have enough diesel. I'm looking at places around Texas where I've seen diesel, high fours, over $5 a gallon. And so, what does this mean? Like I said earlier, diesel is basically the lifeblood of the economy. All of your trucking, everything's trucked here in the U.S. So everything is, the price goes up, right? When you double the price of diesel, you double the transportation costs. That's exacerbated by trucker shortages. I mean, this whole thing's a big mess. It's going to get worse. And that's why, we're going to have this persistent inflation. I think we've quit talking about inflation as being transitory, right? It's pretty sticky. And so you add jet fuel to this, right? Because jet fuel is not necessarily diesel, but it's close to it. It's a distillate also, as is diesel. And, you're going to add jet fuel supply as the summer travel season and travel recovers. We've got a big mess here. The good thing is if you own companies that are refiners, the crack spreads on a barrel of oil are at record highs too, I believe, or close to. Or if you own a company like Suncor in Canada, which produces relatively cheap crude in its oil sands and then refines it in its own refineries, you get a double whammy. So there's always ways to take advantage of this, right? But I wanted to show you this because trucking, construction equipment, right? All this stuff runs on diesel. And, look at this. This is not going to last. Obviously, it's not going to go here and stay here. We're going to break this economy. These high prices are going to break the economy eventually. I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't know how much the economy could absorb. It was already weak. And these prices are just going to kill things. And if you think things are going to get cheaper, they're not. And so we already had prices creeping up. And then we had this bad decision of not working with Russia to resolve this issue before it turned into an invasion, which then resulted in massive sanctions on a country that produces things that the world needs. The Russians don't really need the rest of the world. Okay. Yes, their central bank is sanctioned. They can get around that. They won't get parts for their Boeing and Airbus planes. That'll be a problem eventually. But what's really going to happen? Like I said, the ruble crashed originally, then recovered 66% of the losses it had. The sanctions aren't going to work. And in the meantime, we see this blast off in diesel prices. It's crazy. Oil's fungible, guys. It's not like, we can just isolate ourselves from this stuff. They can isolate themselves. They're willing to, don't underestimate the Russian people's ability to endure and sacrifice. That's not the same with the US people that I've seen, or Europeans. So here we go. History does not repeat, but it rhymes. Last time US oil inventories were this low, prices were on their way to $145 a barrel. That's where we're heading now. Look where we're at. We're blowing right through those. Remember, I showed you the chart earlier of 2008 when last time we had record high oil prices. We're blasting right through that, guys. We do not have enough oil supply. We're not making the, I've been talking about this for 2 years. You know, we were on this trajectory regardless of what happened here with this invasion. Yeah, I thought it would play out over 2 years, 3 years. It's just got accelerated into 3 months or 3 weeks. You put these artificial supply constraints on the world economy and prices go through the roof. Supply is just crashing of oil. So you're going to see, until this turns around, the price is going to keep going up until the economy breaks, until demand is curtailed by price. And so you're not seeing that response. You know, we talked about the Saudis not having enough spare capacity, but with record, well, not record, but with oil prices where they are, look at where the Middle Eastern rig count is. It's not really climbing. It's climbed a little bit from the lows and last, from the lows from the coronavirus crash, but it's not going up massively. There's no supply response. That's great. So that's not encouraging. Where's that supply going to come from if the Middle East is just full of oil? And so again, we talk about stupid decisions, right? Stupidity, the inability to associate cause and effect, to understand how your decision that you make today, how it plays out or affects tomorrow or a year or two in the future or 10 years in the future. And so ING Bank, which is a Dutch bank, will no longer finance new oil and gas projects. ING Group NV will no longer finance new oil and gas projects, its energy chief said, becoming the biggest bank yet to commit to such a step in the fight against climate change. Okay, this is what's going to rip the EU apart. I cannot believe that they're still on this climate change tip. They're going to just, I mean, it's like, if you want to see what an airplane in a spin looks like, in a out of control spin and stall that's going to crash, watch the EU. A lot of bad decisions were made a long time ago that set the course. Then they got on this runaway train with the US and Great Britain against Russia. And how do you get off now? There's no reverse gear. And this is exacerbated by this climate change nonsense. The move by the Dutch financial services firm raises pressure on peers to heed a call by the International Energy Agency, another globalist, pointy shoe, waste of time organization, for a halt to funding for new fossil fuel projects to help cap global warming at no more than, you know, tens of millions of people are going to be on the hook to possibly starve this year. And these idiots are talking about climate change. I mean, the wake up call when it comes, the 2x4 upside the head, the attention getter boot in butt is going to be something to watch. Quote, this is from the bank CEO or the energy guy there, head of the energy chief. Decarbonization of the energy system is of almost existential importance, but so is affordable energy and reliable supply of energy. Yep. And so when you banned or when you are going to try to get off Russian gas and oil, good luck with that. This is just more bad decisions being heaped on bad decisions. And so that's what we need to do as a speculator. We take advantage of the stupid and relieve him of his money. You know, it's a crime. I think it was, what was the name of that poker player? I can't remember. You know, you've heard all these things, you know, if you don't, it's a crime to let a sucker keep his money. It really is. And these people are the biggest suckers in the world. These are the dumbest people. They have they're the highest credentialed and most educated people in the world. And they are making bad decision after bad decision. And that's what a speculator does, right? We're there to take the other side of the bet, to provide the liquidity, and then we get the payoff when we say, What is the premise that is wrong? And then we bet against it. And so if you think EVs, this is what I get a kick out of. You've heard me say it before. Heads we win, tails we win more. You've heard me say, if you don't mine it or grow it, you don't have it. This is a perfect example. So EVs, right? Just buy an EV. That's what Jennifer Granholm said, the energy secretary here, just with a big smirk on her face. Well, here's what happens when you don't invest enough in capacity for various metals. Here's EV battery materials prices go down until they don't. And so what's happened recently? The price of all this stuff is now going up. So guess what happens to the price of the EV batteries, the major component of these electric vehicles? It goes up. All of them, the labor, you can just look at this. Okay, this is hilarious to watch. Okay, Moore's law does not apply to chemistry, and batteries are chemistry technology. They're not microelectronics. And this is another mistake that a lot of people made. Well, the price will just go down. Yes, the price did go down for the last 10 or 15 years because we've been in a bear market for resources. So prices have been going down. Now they're going up. And guess what? The price of EV batteries, that's not going to solve your problem, folks. And like we said, we don't care. We don't care what the outcome is because heads we win, tails we win more. And so I've been talking about a food crisis going back before over a year ago. I had Sean Hackett on. I got some bad feedback on that. When I was talking about where I thought the earth was going to get cooler, not warmer, that we were going to have less and smaller crop yields over time, or the potential that we had 10 years of optimum growing conditions and that we were due for a span of bad weather. And now we've seen that even before all this stuff happened with the invasion, right? I was bullish on agriculture well before any of this happened. And then with this incursion where we have the number 5 and number 1 wheat exporter invading the number 5 wheat exporter, I mean, you're guaranteed to have grain shortages. I didn't realize this, but I believe in the top 5 also is Kazakhstan, which is another Russia-aligned country, if you will. And so if Europe and the rest of these countries don't want Russia's wheat, guess where it's going to go? It'll go to India, it will go to China, it will go to other places. Wheat is fungible. There will be, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how you're going to plant. I heard an analyst, I was listening to a podcast or something, they said, well, they could probably still plant something in Ukraine. Well, how are you going to plant? You're in an actual combat zone. How are you going to get the materials out there? How are you going to get the tractors in the field? I guess here and there you could, but you're not going to have the 100 million tons of grain grown that you had last year. You're not going to have the sunflower oil that's needed around the world as a cooking oil to replace the palm oil because you have export bans in Indonesian palm oil. You see, all this stuff interacts and no one looks at it. And so I've been talking about food shortages for the last several weeks. That's in the bag. I've been talking about food being an issue since this video series started. I started this channel, and I talked about Macron last year, President Macron in France, saying there was going to be food shortages in the world. And now we have President Biden, after he went to visit with the EU or the NATO folks. Here's the headline from the New York Post. Biden warns of global food shortages as Russia-Ukraine war upends wheat supplies. That's terrific. It's in the bag. It's going to happen now. Nothing can be done about it. And all we had to do, this is all because a handful of neocons in the NATO and in the US have a visceral hate for Russia that no one wanted to sit down. They knew they were never going to let Ukraine in NATO. Why didn't they just issue a document and sign a document saying that, and we wouldn't have had this incursion? And now you have the President of the United States. This is the New York Post. This isn't some ridiculous internet channel. March 24th, Biden warns of global food shortages. What are you going to do about it, Mr. President? Madeleine Albright, that demon, passed away this week. She was the one during the Iraq war when it was suggested to her that because of the sanctions on Iraq, 500,000 children in Iraq could possibly die because of the sanctions. And she very coldly and callously responded, "We think it's worth it. We think it's worth it." Lentils have doubled in the last year. This is a very important food source. India has banned the export of this already, as many countries around the world start banning exports of foodstuffs because now everybody's getting worried that there's going to be a food shortage, which there is. And we've seen the US lentil prices have doubled in the last year. I don't know what, I had some falafel last week. I think it was made from lentils, but I've had lentil soup. But evidently, this is a very important foodstuff for many people around the world. And this is just this is just data point after data point after data point. And we haven't even got into the real shortages yet, because this is what happens, right? When you think there's going to be a shortage, what's the instinct to do? Start hoarding, start buying, start restricting exports. The price goes up. Terrific. Hope it was worth it. Here we go. Food hoarding begins. Here's a tweet. Nations around the world are waking up to the threat of a global food crisis, taking steps to secure their own supplies. Yep. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'll tell you what I'm doing. I'm not going crazy buying stuff, but there's sources you can go on the internet where you can buy bulk, or you can go to Costco. It might be worthwhile to lay in some foodstuffs. Or if you are going to buy stuff in bulk, even toilet paper, stuff like that, soap, because we're going to have massive inflation. I used to pick on my wife. She used to do stuff like that. We have a pantry in our garage that we have probably enough, I don't know, we've got enough toilet paper, soap, shampoo, toothpaste to last probably 2 or 3, 4 years. I don't know. It's a lot. And I used to get on her about it, but it makes sense now, right? I mean, and this food thing is going to be a situation. I'm not suggesting that people in the West are going to starve. You're just going to pay more. You'll have access to it because you're able to pay. Remember, we talked about how price rations, but the problem is that, it's not possible for a country like Egypt to support a population of 100 million people without importing most of its grain. And it's not going to be able to do that. So what's the situation? Tunisia is in that situation. Many of the sub-Saharan African countries are in that position. And so they would they'll just be outbid by us and people in Western Europe. But we're going to see inflation go through the roof. And it didn't have to happen like this. This is what I'm trying to say. But it doesn't matter. Nothing can be changed about it now. We're not in power. We don't have the influence on the point issues. We don't make what we need to do is look at things the way they are. And this is what's happening, folks. And fertilizer stocks have went through the roof. I think, if just even to be an agricultural bull, just investing in oil is sufficient. Why? Because if you think about it, industrial scale agriculture is nothing but the conversion of hydrocarbons into food. If you really break it down, that's what it is. Whether it's the nitrogen that goes into the fertilizers, all the fuel that's used, your basic pesticides, all this stuff comes from hydrocarbons, oil and natural gas. So I think that if you really want to break it down and make it easy, if you're investing in energy, you're basically covering all your bases. So but if you have the ability to prepay utility bills or something, or lock in a price, I would consider doing that. I would consider, getting a couple 5-gallon pails and filling it up with some dry beans. You can get those big sacks of rice at Costco. I think you should go on the internet and learn how to keep the humidity from attacking it and how you do long-term storage. But it may be something, if you eat rice anyways, why not buy it now? Okay. So something to think about. I've mentioned this before, going in with a couple of friends or somebody that lives and has a pasture, get a couple cows, beef cows, or steers, and raise them, and then, divide it up, things like that. Something to think about, because I think that you're going to do yourself a favor if you think that way. All right, guys, that's it for this week. Like I said, I'm not going to get into my personal views. A lot of people, when I make these videos, when I start talking about this, it's very emotional for people. Focus on these situations around the resources, the second order effects. We cannot undo what's been done. What has happened, okay? And so we need to look at what are the probabilities now, what are the probabilities of the various outcomes? And that's what we're looking at. I mean, it's in the bag that we're going to have higher energy prices. It's in the bag that we're going to have higher food prices. It's in the bag that we're going to have higher inflation. So what do we do? What can we do as investors and speculators? Because your obligation is really to take care of yourself and your family. You cannot take care of the entire world. You're not running the world. And so as distasteful, somebody said in one of the comments on one of these videos, and I talked about the food situation. I don't really feel good about, taking advantage. You're not taking advantage. You didn't cause the problem, and somebody has to rebuild this thing and come back from it. And those with the capital that have the right mindset, that's the people that will be able to do it. That you have an obligation to take care of your own and before you fix the entire world. Don't forget that. That's my view. That's my opinion. Take it or leave it. All right, guys, that's it for this week. I hope you got something out of this. It's really interesting times. Chaos equals cash. That's what we used to say in the refinery during the turnarounds. We'd make fun of the management and stuff, and they were making good decisions, but we didn't care because we were hourly workers. Chaos equals cash, and that's kind of the situation here. All right, guys, appreciate you. Talk to you next week.